Alright, so for this video, number 3 in the series on atomic structure, I'm going to talk about ions. And in the previous videos, in the first video, we learned that protons are kind of the particle that identifies what that atom is. So if I put in one proton, then it will be a hydrogen. If I add another proton into it, it's no longer a hydrogen. It becomes a helium. So that proton determines what type of element that atom will be. In the last video, we learned that neutrons fill in that nucleus and determine the mass number. Now, those protons cannot change, otherwise the element will change, but we can have different numbers of neutrons in it. So the normal helium atom has a mass of 4 with 2 protons and 2 neutrons, but it might also have an extra neutron to have a mass of 5, and that's a different isotope, a different version of that helium atom. Maybe it has an extra one and has 6 as its mass number. Alright, so we know that protons cannot change and neutrons can change, but what about electrons? Well, electrons can change too. Right? So right now we have 2 protons inside here. Right? We have 2 protons there, so we have a plus 2 charge. And we were saying that how all the pluses and minuses for our first introduction to atoms are going to be the same. So if we had 2 protons, we had 2 electrons. Right? And that's for a typical helium atom. But just like neutrons, we might even have extra electrons or fewer electrons than those 2. So if I click this, you'll see that this is a neutral atom because we have 2 protons, 2 electrons, 2 pluses, 2 minuses, and they cancel each other out and it's neutral. But if I add another electron, right, this atom becomes more negative. Right? Because you can see here we have 2 pluses, but we have 3 minuses because we have 3 electrons. So this is called an ion. We might even have 2 extra electrons. So we would have a -2 charge on this one, or maybe even a -3 charge. Okay? Or possibly, theoretically, we could have 1 less helium or electron, and so now it has a positive charge. We have more positive charges than negative charges, and this would be a positive ion. Right? So let's do this. Let's add a few more protons to it. Okay, so now we have beryllium, which has 4 protons, and so we'll start off with it being neutral with 4 electrons. Right? And then let me take a look at the periodic table real quick. Beryllium has an atomic mass of 9. So let's add 3 more neutrons just to be accurate. Alright, so here's our typical beryllium atom with a neutral charge, a neutral atom. Alright, so again, if I take away a negative, right, so if I minus a negative, and mathematically that should make sense to you, if I take away a negative, then the atom becomes more positive. If I take away another negative, then it becomes more positive. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4 protons and only 2 electrons. So we have 4 pluses and 2 minuses. So this has a +2 charge. And again, this is called an ion. And a positive ion are called cations. Right? And so let's make this neutral again. All right? So now it's a neutral atom. Pluses and minuses equal. Right? And now if I add another electron, now we have a more negative ion, or a more negative atom, and this is a negative ion, which is called an anion, right? But you know, if you can't remember that, just remember that there's a positive ion and a negative ion for right now. All right, and if I add another electron to it, then that becomes even more negative, right? So now the charge is -2, and I can add another one, and now the charge is -3, and so on. All right, and this is important when we're talking about how different atoms can bond with other atoms. And so this understanding of ions is important in that regard. All right, so again, if I take away, we have four protons, and if we have, oops, we have 4 protons and then 4 electrons, then we have a neutral atom. If we take away a negative, then it becomes a more positive atom. If we include more negatives, then it is a more negative atom. And those positively charged and those negatively charged atoms are called ions.